seems that we've not yet completed with this much used metaphor of the making of bread. Firstly, the question has been asked, what is it that we have in us that is represented by the sugar that catalyzes the flour, the yeast, and the water to become dough? Or in other words, to take the stories, the experiences, which of course are all stories, and homogenize them to become the dough of wisdom in us. Now we know there's another phase to bread making, and that is when the dough is kneaded, beaten down. And although there are many stories that are representative of this phase, we don't need them, because we all know very, very graphically what it is to be beaten down, what it is to have our nose rubbed in the dirt, our bellies on the ground, and to rise up again. But then the question is asked, what is the fire that we have that turns the dough into the bread that can nourish not only ourselves, but all of life? But to complete our metaphor, there's a story that provides an answer that needs a question. And the story is about that young girl called Fatima. Now Fatima was born into a family of spinners. There were spinners in their family for generations before, and she learned the art of spinning. Her family made a good living out of this. And one day Fatima's father said to her, "Come, we're going on a journey so that I can sell my wares. And it will be a great opportunity for you to have experiences and learn." But when they had not got very far out to sea, their ship foundered and sank, and all were lost except Fatima, who was washed up onto a far distant shore. Now, when she woke up from the shock of what had happened, she could hardly remember who she was or what she did, as well as not knowing where she was. But as it happened, there was a family of weavers who came by and found her stranded, and although they were not rich, they took her in and took care of her, and she settled into a new life, learning the art of weaving. But then one day, when she was going for a walk along the beach, she was captured by a group of bandits and taken to be sold as a slave in a distant place. But while she was put up on the bench with prices being offered for her, there were not too many around, except for a man who was looking for a maidservant for his wife, and he took pity on this girl and bought her to take her home to become a maidservant. But just after they arrived at the house, the man learned that the ships that were carrying his goods had sunk at sea, and he became penniless. This man was a maker of masts for ships, and there being no possibility of now hiring workers, the man, his wife, and Fatima had to do the hard work of chopping and shaving the logs that would become the masts. So she learned the art of making masts. Now, because she worked so well and so diligently, having a fire in her belly, so to speak, he gave her her freedom. She became an equal. And one day he said, I want you to go on a journey to sell our masts. We do well here, but now we can expand into the export business. You will go far and wide and sell our mast. Now make sure you do a good deal. And so this is what happened. But as she was traveling into the Far East, in between the great islands of Japan and the vast continent of China, the ship met a typhoon and sank. Again, she was washed up on the shore, not knowing where she was and hardly remembering who she was and what she did. She bewailed her fate. How is it that just when I get settled in a new life, something happens? But then, in that vast continent of China, and this is where she was, there was a legend. Because sometime in the far distant past, there was an emperor who had traveled to the great deserts of the Middle East and seen a tent and wanted a tent. This desire, as a legend, was passed down from emperor to emperor. And the custom was that once a year a messenger would be sent out, because it was said that a foreign woman would come who would know how to make a tent. Now it so happened that just as Fatima was washed up on the shore and she was walking into this strange town where she didn't know the language or anyone, the messengers were out. And of course, when people recognized her as a foreigner, looking so completely different and speaking a different language, they found an interpreter. And Fatima was taken to the palace to meet the emperor. And the emperor asked her, "Can you make a tent?" And she said, "Well, yes." And so it was. So she found that the people of China didn't know how to make rope. So she had them find the flax, and she used her spinning skills to make the rope. They didn't have strong enough material for the tent, so she had them weave the special material that would be strong enough. And then they didn't know about tent poles, but she knew about masts. So she, with the help of others, she made the poles that would hold the tent. And then she thought and thought, a tent, how to make a tent. And drawing on all her knowledge, all her wisdom, she made the tent. She had the rope, the material, and the poles to create the tent for the emperor. He repaid her with a vast sum of money, which made her very comfortable. She could build for herself a palatial residence. And we can make the end of the story ourselves. Not only did she settle down and find a husband and have children, but using her skills of being able to make tents, she taught other people how to make their own tents. Lived happily ever after. Now, this story completes our metaphor, and it gives us an answer. But what's the question? What's the question that we can ask when knowing and accepting that we have the sugar that takes all our experiences and makes them into the dough of wisdom? We have the fire that bakes the dough into bread that nourishes ourselves and has the potential to feed life. So what's the question that comes out of this story? What is the question that we might ask ourselves? Now we've got our bread.
That's why it might be, what is my tent?
What is my tent?
That would be my question.
Right on. What is the question that we have the answer for in this story that completes our metaphor of the making of bread? Do we just sit here, think, oh well, if people are hungry, they'll come and ask for my bread? Or do we go out with our basket under our arm and say, here, bread to sell? What's the question in the place that we find ourselves?
What to do?
Yes.
What to do with it?
What are you going to do with it?
I think that might lead to another story.
Oh, is it Carol's by